all too familiar scenes from Texas. There you see the students of Santa Fe High on Friday running out of school after 30 minutes of terror that claimed 10 lives. They are survivors, but stricken. And what we heard from these survivors, a warning for all of us. I knew it. I'm not surprised. Of course it happened here. Children who've never known school without lockdown drills expecting what should be unthinkable. Santa Fe, the 9th fatal school shooting this year, reflected in this stunning fact. There have now been more students or teachers killed by guns in U.S. schools than active duty military deaths in 2018, a year not even halfway over. Our first guest this week, Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick. Governor Patrick, thank you for joining us this morning. Of course, our condolences go out to the community, the families there in Texas this morning. But I wonder if you can reflect on that statistic I just read. More students killed by gun violence in schools than active duty military deaths in 2018.
George, should we be surprised in this nation? We have devalued life, whether it's through abortion, whether it's the breakup of families, through violent movies, and particularly violent video games, which now outsell movies and music. Psychologists and psychiatrists will tell you that students are desensitized to violence, may have lost empathy for their victims by watching hours and hours of video violent games. 97%, George, of teenagers, according to psychiatrists and psychologists, watch video games, and 85% of those are violent games. Are we desensitized? Are these children? Are these teenagers? And then, of course, George, we have our schools that are not hard targets. We've done a good job since 9/11 of protecting government buildings and airports and private buildings, but we have not done anything to harden the target at our schools. And we still have this gun debate, George, of whether or not teachers should be armed or not. I believe, and the parents and the students I've talked to in Santa Fe since Friday believe they should be.
You believe they should be. Of course, it's hard not to miss what you didn't mention there, any kind of regulations of guns. And in fact, you've suggested fewer school doors could lead to fewer school shootings. I know that some security experts have said that could be part of a comprehensive solution, but you've also come in for some pretty harsh criticism from those who think the problem is too many guns, not too many doors.
Well, George, I think I laid out just a moment ago, the problem is multifaceted. It's not any one issue. But we have to look at our culture of violence, just our violent society, our Facebook, our Twitter, the bullying of adults on adults and children on children. We have to look at ourselves, George. It's not about the guns. It's about us. Can there be gun regulation? Gun control, I believe, starts at home, George. Every person who owns a gun must be accountable for their guns at home. We don't know all the facts yet, but this particular young man got his guns in some way from his parents' home. You should have your guns locked up. It's against the law in Texas to let any loaded gun get in the hands of a child, for example. But in terms of guns, George, and regulation, here's the deal. In Texas, we already allow teachers to carry. We leave it up to local parents, school boards, and superintendents. But the students and the parents I talked to Friday in the hospital of a wounded student said, if one teacher in particular, they think, a Marine that was next door to the shooting, had the ability to carry a gun, he may have been able to stop that. We had brave officers, George, who came to the call. There were, this school, George, won a safety award. One of 186 school districts out of over 1,000 in Texas won a safety award. And it came in to save lives on Friday. Even though we lost 10, they probably saved countless other lives because they were there within minutes. 2 armed guards on the campus, plus a roving officer. But we need armed teachers who are trained to help repel these the killers that come onto our campuses.
I know you believe that is one of the answers, but, we also have violent video games in other developed countries. We have Twitter and Facebook in other developed countries. So how do you explain another stunning statistic? Americans of high school age are 82 times more likely to die of gun homicide than their peers in the rest of the developed world. That has to be connected to the availability of guns, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't have to be, George, and I can't compare one country with another country because there are many variables in all these countries. Here's what I know. We live in a violent culture where we've devalued life. Kids go to schools that are not as safe as public and government buildings. Yes, I've been criticized by saying we should have fewer entrances. Look, you need all the exits, fire exits you need, but we should have eyes on students walking into our schools. This student walked in with a gun under a trench coat Friday, and no one in law enforcement stopped him. We can't guard every entrance of the 8,000 plus schools we have in Texas, but we can guard one or two. We have to think out of the box, George. We can stagger our start times. Let kids get to school a little earlier. Let us keep eyes on them. You know, the Israelis believe in detect and deter and deny. We don't do a very good job of that in our schools. We need to put our emphasis to protect our kids. In terms of gun laws, George, and look, I respect and understand those who say they don't want teachers armed. But we know we have to send a message to those who would come on, whether they're adults that come onto campus, whether they're terrorists or whether they're students, that that's a hard target and you're not going to get into school with a gun. We have to stop that. And in terms of gun control starts at home. Accountability for gun owners, I'm a gun owner, starts at home. And we need the best background checks we have. We need to be very sensible about this, George. But remember, we cannot sit back and say it's the gun. It's us as a nation, George, on this Sunday morning, when we all go to church and pray or go to the synagogue or the mosque or wherever we go, let's look inward at ourselves as a nation.
And when we look inward,
when
we look inward, sir, are we going to find that guns are more available here in greater numbers and greater lethality than any other developed country in the world?
They are, George, and here's the reality. They are a part of who we are as a nation. It is our Second Amendment. You know, it talks about a well-run militia, the Second Amendment. Our teachers are part of that well-run militia, by the way. It's guns that also stop crimes. In our church in Sutherland Springs, George, that I was there after the shooting, it was a man who was able to pick up his rifle and stop that shooter from potentially going down the road to another church or killing law enforcement officers. Guns stop other criminals from committing crimes, George. Again, sensible regulation, absolutely. Background checks, absolutely. Every responsible gun owner doesn't want anyone who's deranged or shouldn't have a gun to have a gun. But George, we take the guns out of society. If you or anyone else thinks that makes us safer, then I'm sad to say that you're mistaken. That will just get those who are evil, who will always have access to guns, be able to put more of us in danger. And again, in Texas, we believe in our Second Amendment. We believe in our Constitution of freedom and our First, our Second, and 10th Amendment. We believe in our Constitution. That's what we stand on. But today, George, I will tell you, on this Sunday morning, Governor Abbott and I are going to a church in just a little bit to be with people in Santa Fe. I can tell you, George, we stand on the rock of our faith in Texas. This has been a long year, George. The biggest natural disaster in the history of the country, the biggest church shooting in the history of our state. Governor Abbott and I have been to a lot of funerals, and we've held a lot of hands and hugged a lot of folks, and I will tell you, it is their faith in their fellow man, is their faith in God, and it is Texas coming together and standing strong. And no one, George, no one with a gun is going to walk into a school or anywhere else and bring our state to our knees. We will stand strong, and we will stand together.
It has been a tough year for your state. Governor, thanks for your time this morning.
But we stand strong, and thank you, George, and pray for our families today, and pray for our state, and pray for our country.
We will. Thank you, sir. Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.